I think I was going around Dunnet Head, which is the top northeastern point of Scotland. And that is deeply unpleasant to go around. And I remember thinking, God, not only am I battling up here, I'm now going to get eaten by some killer whales. So,
hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. On today's episode, I'm going to chat to a guy who's recently sailed around the entire coastline of the United Kingdom and nearly didn't make it. It's a warm welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show to Mr. Neil Peters. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Is it your first time on a podcast show?
I think it probably is, actually, on a podcast. Yeah, I've never done a podcast before. Virgin podcaster.
I love having Virgin podcasters on my show.
Yeah.
Tell us, to all our listeners out there across the world today, whereabouts are you chatting to us from?
So I'm currently sitting in my home in Eastbourne, which is in the southeast of England.
Cool. Now, if I was a betting man, I'd probably say if you're looking out the window, it's probably raining, is it?
It's not. Eastbourne is the sunniest place in the whole of the UK. That's an official statement, and statistically could be verified, I think. Yeah, it is. No, certainly, having been around the whole of the UK, I can confirm it is much sunnier than everywhere else.
Spoken like a true Englishman. Very good. Before we go any further, I've introduced you as Neil Peters, but we've also got to talk about a.k.a. stick daring. What's this whole stick daring thing about?
So it's a bit like Superman and Clark Kent. So when I'm on the land, I'm Neil Peters, a very normal person who walks down the road, goes to work, comes home, eats his dinner at 5 o'clock in the evening, gets up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And when I'm in my boat, I am an entirely different person. I'm kind of in a different mindset in the boat. So stick daring is my round Britain UK persona.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that's good to clarify that. You and I are going to chat today about sailing and your recent epic adventure, but first I'd really like to start to understand when did sailing first come into your life and what inspired that?
Oh, wow. Well, I had a cousin, actually. I used to go to, my mother and father used to pack me off in the summer to my cousins who lived in a place called Lowestoft. And Lowestoft is not very famous for anything other than the fact it's the easternmost point of the United Kingdom, funnily enough.
Okay.
I only recently found out. And so at the age of 8, we were sent off to my cousins for the summer. And my eldest cousin, Martin, sailed a mirror dinghy and took me out on the Alton Broad, which is like a flat, almost like an inland lake, but it's called the Broads. And we used to blast up and down in his mirror dinghy. And I used to think it was fantastic. But I didn't really start sailing properly until I got to school. I had a teacher who used to take us on a Wednesday when I was 14.
So what was it about sailing that got you hooked into it?
I don't know really. It just kind of just got me. It was the fastest thing I could do at 8 years old. And I think I just used to love it, and it was the sense of great freedom.
It's that thing, isn't it? It's just being that connection to nature as well.
Yeah, it was just a fantastic feeling. Really, it makes you feel really alive.
Sailing a lazy dinghy around the entire coastline of the mainland UK is somewhat of an insane idea. I bet this was some kind of a barroom bet or something, was it?
Sailed all over the world, and mainly in lasers, and done events for years and years. And I did had to go at the Olympics sort of thing in '91. Did a circuit, and to be honest, I hadn't really ever connected fully with my own country. And by my own country, the United Kingdom was counted as not as one country because it includes England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. But I'd never really travelled around the coastline. And in a bar, a friend of mine, or in the pub, was saying, "Look, why don't we go and get on our bikes and have a look and explore where we live?" And he said, "You've got a boat and I've got a bike, and why don't I will give you a race and all this sort of stuff." And this went on for a few years actually. And in the end, one day I said, "Okay, well, let's do that then. How about we do a test?" So his name was Jeff. So Jeff and I set off in January, which was pretty freezing cold in England, from my local sailing club at Pevensey Bay, and he got his bike out and he raced me to a place called Bexhill, which frankly was a rubbish race because it was a flat, it was all flat, and he had go along the road. I went on the sea against the tide that particular day. It was quite windy. And we took a radio each and a phone. And when I got to Bexhill, I kind of stood up in the boat, and I was carrying all this extra weight to simulate carrying luggage or gear, and I capsized, got my foot caught around the main sheet. The sail didn't collapse properly. I was nearly drowned. Got ashore, freezing cold, and he said, "Where have you been?" So I remember saying to him, "Geez, what have you been up to?" He said, "I've been here for about an hour. I've already had 4 pints." So the race didn't go terribly well to start with. And weirdly, Jeff actually emigrated to a place called Inverness in Scotland.
Yeah.
And he didn't do the cycling. So he dropped out of the race.
After all that.
So even though he won, he would have won the race easily. Well, I don't think he would have, actually. Going around Britain on a bike is pretty tough if you follow the coastline.
It actually seems to be a real thing, this thing that people sit in bars all over the world and think up these incredible, insane challenges to do.
That's called alcohol, isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably it. I don't know how many guests I've had on this show that were inspired by a barroom conversation.
The more I thought about it, I talked to more people, and then people started saying to me, sailing around Britain. And then one of my friends actually put a Facebook page up under the guise of stick daring sailing around Britain or sailing around the UK. And at that point, it was pretty much cemented in position. So that Facebook page sat there for 2 years with one follower. And then I started preparing a couple of boats, and I thought, I can't take my good boat because, I didn't want to scratch the bottom.
Yeah. And
I hunted around and had a look for some old lasers and found 2. I just started chopping up and thought, actually, these are no good. These are useless. And then I found another one I paid 50 quid for, which was really quite sound. It had been painted by, it was an ex-Ministry of Defence boat that had been especially made for the sail training gang, I think, for the Ministry of Defence. And I think what happened is they obviously couldn't sail, so they smashed all the corners off the boat. But they managed to paint it in about 8 coats of paint, and it had been just abandoned for years and years. And I don't actually think it had been sailed that much. But it looked like it had been sailed a lot, so I fixed the corners and belt sanded the bottom and re-gel coated the bottom with a pretty sort of thick coat of paint, and put a metal plate on the bottom for dragging up the beach, and that was the boat I took around Britain.
A lot of people listening to the show have got no idea what a laser is, so I just think it's something you do with your bikini line or something. So what's the actual dimensions of this boat you're talking about?
It's a 14-foot long boat. I can't actually remember how wide it is, but it's about as wide as your bath, maybe a little bit wider. So, and it's quite a shallow hull, so it's like a giant windsurfer, really. You can sit in it, but it's only I don't know what measurement do you use? Inches, feet, and inches. So it's only about 30 inches deep. So it's pretty shallow, and it's designed to be a sort of self-draining cockpit. So you get reasonably wet in it.
What was the logic behind this actual type of boat? Was it something you were comfortable with? You know this boat well?
Yeah, I've sailed these boats since I was 16 years old, and there's pretty much the main boat I've sailed most of my life. So I feel very comfortable in it, and most people thought I was nuts going around in this boat because it is, it's a single-handed boat that capsizes, but it's only got one sail. You use the standard rig, which is what I use going around the country. When I started off, I was 90 kilos, a bit less now. I lost about 4 kilos around doing the trip. So I'm about the optimal weight for it now, maybe slightly heavier.
It's funny you lost 4 kilos because every photograph I've looked at of you doing the trip, you've got a beer in your hand and some boat club or pub around the place.
Yeah, that's just for cameras.
Now you're married to wife Emma. What did she think of this insane idea of you doing this trip?
Well, I didn't tell her too much about it, to be honest. I kept it relatively low key, and I've been married to her for more years than I can remember. Actually, I think we've known each other since we were teenagers. Anyway, so I did sort of mention it to her a few times, and then she sort of warmed to it over a period of time. But the beauty of Emma is she's blissfully ignorant, really, at how dangerous it potentially was. And because she doesn't really sail that much, she's sat in the boat with me a few times, but she's not really, what I'd call a sailor. And so that was an interesting experience. The toughest bit was really how I was going to manage my business. I've got a business that I refurbish and renovate historic doors. And so I trained someone up for 6 months before I left to replace me. And the day before I left, she left.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, that was a bad day. So Emma took it over. Emma said, I'll don't worry, I'll manage it all while you're away. And she did a fantastic job, actually.
It sounds to me like you better keep Emma on for a long time.
Yeah, so we kept Emma quite busy. So she wasn't that focused on what was going on initially. And then she started following me around the country a bit.
So once your mates had put the Facebook page up and you were either basically pushed into doing this, how long did it take for you to kind of bring this project together?
Not very long, actually. I guess I only put the boat together 2 weeks before I went, which wasn't long enough. And my preparation was pretty poor. I've got a really good guy who was one of my old mates. His name is Pete Young. He was very elegant at pointing out how badly prepared I was, and continues to do so. So I made him responsible head of safety. So he actually set up this thing called the Safety Channel about 2 days into the journey, because he realised actually it wasn't terribly safe at all. I would say I was about as badly prepared as you could have been, really, for a trip like this, in hindsight, and it was a sort of growing experience.
Yeah. Did you update your will before you left?
I didn't know. I wasn't even insured when I went round. So,
oh wow! There you go.
I just went for a sail, really. I just never thought. I just treated it like going to work. And I remember pushing off the beach at Eastbourne, and I had a few people who came and waved me off, but I had not many, because I hadn't really told that many people at that point. I'd told a few, or I hadn't given much notice. Because initially I was just going to go and see my mate Jeff in Inverness just to wind him up. And I thought I'd sail up to say, look, Jeff, I've done my bit. Get your bike out and you can follow me around for the rest of the trip.
Exactly.
And it sort of went from there, really.
That's really interesting. Now, you did this also with a charitable angle to it. Tell us about that. How did that come about?
Okay, so I met a guy. I did actually do some research. I mean, I'm making it sound a bit glib, this, but I did quite a bit of research about 3 years before I went. I found two other people who had actually circumnavigated the UK in small boat, and one had done it in a Wayfarer, which is a two-man boat. A guy called Jeremy Warren, he did it in a boat called Hafren with Phil Kirk. And they did it pretty quickly, but they did it slightly differently. It's a bit easier in a two-man boat because one can sleep and one can sail. So I went to see them down in the west of England. Can't actually remember where they lived, but I saw Jeremy, had a chat with him, and then I met another guy called Ron Pattenden through Jeremy, who had actually done, who had been around the UK in a laser. But he'd taken a very long time. He'd done it more as a sort of pub crawl, really.
Right.
And he did it. He took about 6 months to do it.
Okay.
And I met him, and he gave me a few good tips. And he's a classic, cracking guy. I mean, he's tough as boots. Ron is, and but he's probably not the world's best sailor. But wow, he's a tough old cookie. He gave me a handful of rivets before I left, and a load of mast sleeves, and he said, "You're going to need these." And I said, "Really? What am I going to need those for?" And he said, "Well, I broke 4 masts and regularly had to re-sleeve my mast, and I took a rivet gun and lots of rivets, and you're definitely going to need these." So he gave me a whole pile of rivets, which I'm pleased to say I didn't use any of them. So I got rid of them fairly quickly, actually. But
you were telling us about the charitable aspect of this. You were doing some research.
Yes. So I got diverted there. So Ron, when he did it, he had done it and raised money for prostate cancer because his father had died of it. So having spent a bit of time with Ron and talked to him, I said, "Look, Ron, I'm going around. I said it'd be a real shame if I didn't raise some money for charity. So I think what I'll do is I'll just carry on the baton, and I'll raise money for prostate cancer as well. I did a bit, looked into it. He told me quite a lot about the issues, and I didn't realise it before I started, but 80% of men at the point where they die, they either have it or they have prostate cancer. If you're 80 years old, generally 80% of men have got it. They don't necessarily always kill it. It doesn't always kill you. And the tricky bit is identifying the ones where it develops earlier.
Yeah, sure.
But it is it's more prevalent in men than breast cancer is in women.
Very interesting.
That's quite a stunning statistic, and that's worldwide. So,
had you announced prior to leaving this fundraising aspect of the journey?
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I've got a Just Giving page up, which you can find under Stick Daring, which is just still open at the moment.
Okay.
We've just gone past the £20,000 mark now. So when I first set out, I thought, I'll get £1,000 or something, not very much. I wasn't expecting to raise very much money, and I wasn't actually expecting to go all around the UK, to be honest, when I first started.
So that's interesting. You didn't think you'd actually make it all the way around?
Well, I wasn't planning on going all around. I committed to going to Inverness, which is to see my mate Jeff.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I thought I'd go all the way around, but I just thought I'd better, see how it all went, really, because it's quite an undertaking.
Yeah.
And I got to Inverness quite quickly. I got there in, I think, 20 days or something. So thought, it's summer. I'll keep going.
That first day when you left and pushed off the beach there at Eastbourne, what was the feeling like when you actually got out into the water and you were off? What were the emotions attached to that?
It's a bit surreal, really. So I sailed off the beach. Everyone waved goodbye. I had about 25 or 30 people. And I sailed the wrong way because I decided I was going to go anti-clockwise because Ron had gone clockwise. And if you go anti-clockwise around the UK, you pretty much go against most of the prevailing winds.
Right.
So unbeknown to me, that actually makes it quite bumpy because you normally have to run with the tide against the wind all the time. But so when I set off, I sailed the wrong way to Eastbourne Pier, which was about half a mile the wrong way, and I got to the pier and then set off anti-clockwise round the UK, which is where Ron had started from as well. I thought it was going to be really easy. It was a lovely sunny day. The breeze came in. I was kind of relaxing, put my feet up on the boat, put the radio on. I had a little radio with me, so I put the radio on and was listening to the cricket. England beating Australia, I think, and or maybe not.
Just one test.
And I thought all was going to be pretty good. And then the breeze came up, and then I thought, I'll keep going a bit longer. And that day I did a huge amount of distance, and at 8:30 at night I was still trying to figure out where I was going to stop. And I remember I got to a place called Hythe, which unbeknownst to me, before I'd set off, there was a firing range. So all around the UK there's quite a few firing ranges. And there were some red flags and red lights that were on this sort of gantry as I came up to it, and there was nowhere for me to pull in initially because it was all like a wall. And I remember phoning Pete, my head of safety channel. I phoned him up and said, Pete, what are these red lights all about and these flags? And Pete's an ex-military guy, and he said that's a firing range. You're at the Hythe firing range. And I said, okay. I said, what's the plan there? He said, well, can you hear any firing? I said, no, I don't hear any firing. He said, well, I said, flags. He said, no, they're probably not firing. So you'll be fine. Just go through. So I went through. And within about 20 minutes, this huge, great, powerful rib zoomed up to me and kind of looked a bit grumpy with all its lights on. It was getting dusk as well. And they'd informed me that I was in the middle of a live firing session and that they had to stop because I was in the way. And could I please get out of the way? And I said, well, I can't because there's no wind and the tide's just pushing me through. And they then offered me the most enormous warp to put on the front of my boat. And it was so big, I thought, that would just sink the boat if I put that on it. So I said, I can't do the warp. So they then escorted me through the firing range. right near the end, there was another set of lights and red flags and a big tower, and the 10 targets were lined up like discs, numbered 1 to 10. As my transom went past the 10th target, all the guns opened up. It's just like, oh my God, what are they doing? So I then was instructed to land on the beach and report to the watchtower. The guard in the watchtower, which I thought, blimey, let's get a bit serious. So anyway, I landed on the beach. This is day one, bear in mind. Pulled the boat up, phoned head of safety on my side, Pete again. I said, Pete, he's told me to report to the watchtower. What do you think? He said, just ignore it. And put your tent up and go to sleep. So I followed instructions from my head of safety and put the tent up on the beach and went to sleep. Had some food and then went to sleep. That was the first day, really. No one came to arrest me, so that was a good result. I didn't get shot.
Considering he got you into that position, did you end up firing your head of safety after that?
No, he was fantastic. He was fantastic all the way around. He was, in fact, he recruited 4 other people. So after that day, we decided, I hadn't really told him where I was going or what I was doing that much. So he set up a WhatsApp safety channel link, which I had to every day fill out this rather laborious, go through a process of actually figuring out where I was going to go, what time I was going to leave, what time I was going to arrive, where I was going to go via. So I used to make it up for the first couple of days, to be honest. I think for the first 2 weeks, I just made it up just to keep him quiet. But it proved to be very useful in the long run to have Pete there. So yeah.
Sure that every day took a lot of planning. Was there a lot of effort put into, wind and tides and things like that were obviously going to impact you going around the wrong way for a start?
Well, you see, I was beautifully ignorant. I mean, I've done a yachtmaster course theory because my wife put me into one about 10 years into sailing because she thought I ought to do it, and I pretty much used to come out bottom of the class in all the theory tests. Practically, I was fine, but so I'm not that great at planning, if I'm honest. And so I had a Navionics app on my phone. So I'd look at the Navionics app, look at the wind forecast. I did, and thought, well, it looks like I could probably do, 5 knots or 6 knots today, an hour. I then put a pin in where I was going to finish up and then guessed a few places along the way. Very quickly, I did sort out going with the tides. So I made sure I always went with the tidal flow, because you just really didn't get very far against the tide unless it was windy. The UK tides are pretty strong most of the time. So as the trip went on, my planning got better and better because I had more and more incidents, so I sort of learned the hard way, really, that planning would have been a good idea to be a bit more meticulous. But the first week of sailing in England, I had really nice winds and it was sunny and, just a lot of beaches you could land on. So I wasn't that well planned, if I'm honest.
You actually set off on this trip in July of this year, so in inverted commas, summertime in the UK. You would have had fairly reasonable weather?
Yeah, so the first week I had lovely weather. 17th of July, it was beautiful sunshine, there was a nice breeze. Mostly it was coming from behind me, so I was reaching or running most of the time. And it was only really when I started getting near to... so I did some big crossings. I crossed the River Thames, which is called the Thames Estuary. That was a very big crossing, and in fact, that particular day, the weather wasn't that good, actually. It was windy, but the visibility was poor.
What kind of distance are we talking about there across the Thames Estuary?
The Thames Estuary is bigger than the English Channel, its narrowest point. So I think it was 27 or 26 miles distance across the water. So you get to a point where you can't see land either side. And there's some big wind farms they've built in the middle of the estuary. It's a very busy shipping lane. So that was quite a big day, actually, crossing the Thames Estuary. It was my first proper crossing, and that was when the weather started changing a bit.
Did you have any fear at that stage in terms of first time being outside of land and with the weather coming in?
Oh yeah, plenty of that. Yeah, I mean, I was at a place called Broadstairs the day before, and I'd met a load of the Broadstairs Sailing Club, which was the south side of the Thames estuary, and that was really helpful. So I met two really experienced old boys who knew that crossing really well. And they basically said to me, "You've got 4 hours to get across the main part of the estuary before the tide turns." They told me where to set up and where to cross. I actually crossed a bit earlier than they suggested, so it was a bit wider. They threw in at the end of the conversation that if you miss the tide, you're going to just be washed out to the North Sea because you've got no chance of fighting against the tide. So I kind of really went for it. When I went across there, I was like flat out as fast as I could possibly go. And it was windy, really windy.
Yeah.
And so I must admit, I had a couple of very uncomfortable hours thinking, crikey, I've got to get across before I get washed out to the North Sea.
So where did you stay every night? What was the plan as far as accommodation goes?
Pretty much no plan. So I had a tent, I had a gas cooker, and I had enough food to run with for 3 days at a time. And when I landed, I either put my tent up or quite often I got met on the beach by someone completely strange, a total stranger would come up and they'd say, "What are you doing?" And within about 5 minutes, on more than one occasion, I mean, I'd say in the majority of occasions I met someone, they said, "Well, where are you staying?" And I said, "Well, I've got my tent." They said, "Why? Do you want to come and stay at mine?" Or there's an incredible number of people just who I'd never met before offered me accommodation. It was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary, and I got quite good actually at triggering those, where are you staying words as the trip went on. I got quite good at managing into, "Oh yeah, that'd be great if you, I'd love to stay at yours."
Reminds me of one of the photos I saw of your boat upside down on a sandhill somewhere. What was that about?
So sometimes if I landed in the wrong place, which is quite a lot of the time, if it had been particularly breezy, as I went further north, the weather got worse and the breeze got more unpredictable and changeable. And often I'd end up in a place. I think you're probably thinking of. I landed up the east coast of England, north of the River Humber. The weather starts to really change, and I think I left my boat near Aberdeen, where it was really, really windy that day, and I'd sailed so far, and I was going to go into Aberdeen Harbour, or Peterhead, I think it was, after Aberdeen, Peterhead. And up there, the harbours are built with the most enormous harbour walls and massive, great big turrets on the outsides of them with lighthouses on. I mean, gives you an idea how ferocious the winters can be on that east coast. And they have triple harbours. Quite often they have an outer, an inner, and an inner, so that the boats don't all get smashed about. And in this instance, I remember coming up to this harbour, thinking, "There's no way I'm going to go through those harbour walls," because the waves were going over the top of the walls, and it must have been blowing nearly 30 knots, if not more, occasionally. So I went round the headland, which was horrendous, and I just saw this big sandy beach and surfed in, dumped the boat on the beach, and of course it was like a surf beach. You couldn't get off. Once you're on, you're off. So that was a disastrous idea. I should have gone through the harbour wall, gone into the inner harbour, and I'd have been fine getting off the next day. But I did this quite a lot, actually, because I got pretty scared, to be honest, sometimes. If you get caught in those big winds and big seas, it just got quite pretty hectic. So when I landed on beaches, I used to sort of pretty much bury the boat to pretend it looked like it had been abandoned, roll the sail up, and just try and make it look as unstealable as possible, so that the local youths or anyone wouldn't take much interest in it. So the boat was set up to look like it had been abandoned.
I noticed that you had the number 27 on your sail. Was that how many times you capsized, was it?
It wasn't, no. 27 is the number that's tattooed on the bow of the boat. So it was MOD 27, and the boat number was 2027. So that was the every laser is issued with a manufacturer number. 2027 dated that boat built in about 1970, 71, somewhere in that region. So it's a pretty old boat.
I've actually got a different understanding for it. I think that's when you're going to go around again, is 2027.
No, I don't think I'll be doing it again, the laser. But I must say, actually, I was talking to someone this morning, and I said that I'd had a few incidents where I'd been approached by some very large motorboats that I'd come to investigate whether I was in trouble or not, in particularly big seas and big winds. I remember seeing one at the Mull of Kintyre, which was my most eventful day. And this boat came to have a look at see if I was in trouble, because I was sort of flapping around a bit in massive seas because the wind had really picked up, and I was just like trying to sit it out for 20 minutes or so. And this boat came up to find me, and it buried its nose into a wave. And I honestly thought this boat is in more trouble than me, because it didn't come up for absolutely ages. It went straight under the wave. It looked to me like it was going to completely carry on going, and it did come up, obviously. But after that, I thought, crikey, this is a good boat to have, a laser. Floats on top of the waves, doesn't go under them.
Did you not think for days like that just to sit it out and wait, or was it just the weather was too constantly like that to sit it out?
Well, so what tends to happen? This is this particular part is in Scotland. So in Scotland, it's the same sort of weather they have in Iceland and in Scandinavian countries. They say if you're near the North Sea, wait 5 minutes and the weather will change. And so often you start the day in beautiful sunshine, and then by the end of the day it'd be howling gales. And it was really difficult to predict and forecast. And I spent a lot of time in Scotland studying forecasts, talking to experts. The fishermen were the main ones. In fact, they were really good bit of advice. But quite often you had to commit. So the coastline is so rugged in some parts, especially the Western Isles of Scotland, that you have no bailout options. So what you're always looking for, places you can land where it's going to be safe. And quite often there's 20, 30 miles of continuous rock, cliffs and coastline, and there's nowhere to land. So once you start, you are completely wedded to your decision to go. So if the wind changes, you just got to tough it out and hope you can get to the other side. So in my case, in this particular instance, from the Mull of Kintyre, there's a very long gap between. There was an island called Dinghy, where there's then a 20-mile leap to get around the headland, and the headland had no bailout. There's nowhere to land at all along that headland until you're around it. And I just got caught in this huge weather bomb. They come off the cliffs. So although the gradient forecast might have been 20, 25 knots, when they come off the cliffs with black clouds on them, you can get 35, 40 knots. So that's a bit more than the laser really enjoys being in.
Incredible.
And I must admit, after the Mull of Kintyre, I was pretty traumatised. I honestly thought I wasn't going to survive that one. Because there were what they call overfalls around there as well, where the waves break on top of the waves. So the waves I got a bit of a wake-up call going around there. I wasn't expecting it. And it gets quite shallow near some of the headlands. And you get these massive overfalls. And I nearly got washed out of the boat on the first one. And after that, I was a bit more aware of it. But the only way out of them was to go head straight up, and, try and climb over the crest before they broke on you. Oh yeah, I mean, it was horrendous. That was really, really bad. That was a very bad day, and that sort of stayed with me actually for at least a week afterwards. I didn't want to get back in the boat afterwards. I was really uncomfortable. I remember landing actually and phoned got another guy on my team who on that day was watching me, Rupert. He works for American Express. He was in a lovely, comfortable office in sunny London, and he was tracking my progress. And I remember phoning him up and said, Rupert, Rupert, I'm alive. I'm like, oh, good. He said, oh, great, good. Lovely day here. You know, it's like, Rupert, I'm alive, mate. I'm alive. Just thought I'd let you know. Good. Anyway, you're in the wrong place. You've got to get back in the boat and sail 2 more miles. I'm not getting back in the boat. You know, it's like, there's no way I'm getting back in that boat. It's on the beach upside down. I'm not getting. He said, there's nothing there. You got nothing. It's just like sand. You know, what are you going to eat tonight? And in the end, he put his credit card behind a bar for me.
Yeah.
At another beach to convince me to go down the 2 more miles to find civilization. But that was a difficult 2 miles. Got to be honest.
I've always wondered how much of these adventures that people do, like this one that you've done, how much you actually remember of it. So I've got a question here that's a bit out of left field. Do you remember going into the Rose Hardy Community Boat Club?
Oh, I do. Yeah, they were fantastic.
Do you remember the name of the Labrador dog you met there?
Oh God, I can't actually. No, I've probably got it noted down. No, what was the dog's called? What was the dog called?
I don't know, but I saw the dog and I thought, I wonder if you remember the name of the dog.
Yeah, no, I can't remember the Labrador dog. I'm trying to remember. Rose Hardy, they were fantastic. So I'd been up the day before. It's very unusual actually, but I'd been to see them the day before because I was looking for a new hatch cover because I cracked my hatch cover very early on. And I'd got duct tape over it, and I was kind of running for nearly a week with a cracked hatch cover, and I was beginning to get a bit twitchy. And someone had told me near Rose Hardy there was a marine store I could buy a new cat hatch. Anyway. So I drove all the way there, ordered it over the phone. They weren't there. They left it out under a boat for me. When we got there, it was the wrong size. And I think I went to visit one of the members of that community who ran the sailing club, and that's where the dog was. And we had a cup of tea with him that night, and I was talking to him. He said, "Well, he said if you pull in here tomorrow, if you get this far, we've got a little workshop. I'm sure we can have a look at the boat and figure out." And I wasn't really expecting to pull in there at all because I remember pulling into Rose Hardy. You basically have to sail through rocks where it looks to me like there was like a 3-inch gap to get through the rocks to get into their harbour. And they pointed it out on the shore. You go left here, right here, straight. And those sort of places I've been avoiding like the plague, because they're just so tricky to figure out unless you've got local knowledge. Anyway, bizarrely, I actually made the call to go in there, and that was a fantastic call because I rolled the boat on the beach. All the battens had been snapped that morning from a waves dumping on me getting off the shore, and then the hatch had broken, so the boat was half full of water and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, they got the boat out, they put it in the workshop, they built me a new hatch cover, they put a wooden plate and we glued up the old one. And in fact, that went all the way around Britain, that hatch cover.
Fantastic.
And it didn't leak. It didn't leak at all. And they actually handmade me some new battens. They actually tapered them with a plane, and someone else did. I think they fixed something else. I think the baler had broken. They were fantastic. Really, really superb people actually up there. Yeah,
brilliant. So if you want your boat fixed, go to Rose Hardy Community Boat Club and they'll help you out.
Yeah, they're good guys. They build you a boat as well if you wanted one. They had a lovely boat they've been building actually in their workshop. I think they pay £1 a year for their workshop. They rent it from the local council. Yeah. And it was a fantastic workshop.
Hey, I spoke to a few of my friends over the last couple of days and telling them I was going to have a chat to you, and a couple of them said, hey, make sure you ask him this. So I've got a couple of questions here from some mates of mine. You ready for those? This one's a doozy. Did you see any Russian submarines during your trip?
No.
No, simply no. Okay. What was the most interesting thing you saw in the water during the entire journey?
Interesting is interesting. I saw a couple of orcas so I saw a couple of orcas and turned immediately and went the opposite way. I was having a very bad day when I saw them. I think I was going around Dunnet Head, which is the top northeastern point of Scotland. And that is deeply unpleasant to go around. And I remember thinking, not only am I battling up here, I'm now going to get eaten by some killer whales. So, so I remember hightailing it that way. A lot of seals, tons of jellyfish,
Yeah.
Loads of jellyfish around this summer.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was all about, but
Mm.
yeah, I guess the orcas probably were the most interesting.
Okay, so next one was, what's the most awe-inspiring thing you saw during the trip, other than the orcas, obviously?
Oh gosh, I think just the Scottish Highland coastline is just incredible, you know, to see from the sea. If you weren't actually having to bob up and down on the water, it would be, you know, just an extraordinary landscape, just extraordinary, beautiful landscape.
To what time of the day were you sailing every day? What time did you pull into the beach each day?
So it varied enormously depending on the tides. But I used to sort of treat it as a job. So I'd try and sail for 8 hours a day. And sometimes I'd set sail at 5:30 in the morning. Other times I wouldn't go till lunchtime. The latest I think I came in was, I tried not to come in after dark. I got caught out a couple of times where I did come in after dark. But most of the time I came in before it got dark. So in Scotland, that wasn't until about 9 o'clock when I was up there, 9:30. But I generally tried to run for 8 hours. So I kind of was really pacing myself. When I first started, I ran for more hours than that. And I just found really quickly that levels were just dropping too much. So I got much better at pacing the whole program.
What did you learn about yourself the most from this trip?
I learned I'm very impatient. I learned how to wait, to be patient. And quite often I got stuck out in the middle of nowhere for, you know, several hours with no wind. So no wind was actually much more problematic than too much wind. And I used to get really cross. So I used to start swearing and shouting and throwing my toys around the boat. You know, come on, Wayne, where are you? I'm bored with sitting here. I don't want to do this. So I actually I think I got better at being patient. I'd say I think I learned that I wasn't very, you know, I always thought I was quite mellow and quite chilled out, but actually I found myself getting increasingly cross with silly little details. So I think I managed to get my head into just taking a deep breath and just sitting it out after quite a few weeks of doing it. I got quite good at just sort of thinking, well, that's how it is today. I just got to hang around. I'm sure it'll change, and invariably it did actually.
Did it teach you to live in the now more than you perhaps would have before? Yeah,
it's a whole different game. You know, it's like, you think we're in a world of replays, aren't we? Or I'll press the button or turn the remote off. But it definitely took me back to a much rawer human state where, eating, sleeping, moving at the right time with the winds, with the tide, with the weather. It's very much more, you become really in tune with your environment in a way that you're not really that aware of until you actually have to. And there really are some life and death decisions made on the basis of that. And I felt very good. I mean, for example, I haven't watched any of the Brexit discussions that have been going on all the time, been away, and I think I actually felt really positive about the fact I haven't. In my instance, my whole being was just surviving, keeping moving, keeping healthy, eating at the right time, making sure I kept my body in good shape and enough to keep going for the next day.
Are you mentally, physically stronger than you thought you were, perhaps?
I think now, actually looking back at it, I think I had some pretty bad moments. I think I'd say I was mentally stronger than I thought I was. I thought I knew myself pretty well, actually, and before I started, I was quite surprised at some of my emotions. Like, for example, after the Mull Kintyre event, I remember going to a place called Port Patrick and pulling in. There was a big party going on the shore. There was a folk festival going on in the town. And it was a Saturday night. I was really nervous about putting my boat on the beach. So I remember tying it up next to the lifeboat on a pontoon, left it floating, which is quite odd for a laser, leaving it in the water overnight. I remember going to the pub to get some food because that was the only place I could find open. And at 10 o'clock at night, thinking, what am I going to do here now? I'm going to have to sleep somewhere. And I was going to go back and put my tent up. And one of my team, in fact, my wife, had rung around and said, look, has anyone got anywhere for this Brown Britain guy to stay? And someone had replied on a voicemail message, said, look, I'm not in. Here's the code to the front door key lock. It's in the third room on the left. Let yourself in, and I'll see you in the morning. And there's no charge, So that was incredible.
Fantastic.
And, when I went down, I met the guy in the morning. He runs an Airbnb, and he had a spare room. And his name is Simon, and he said, oh, morning, I'm Simon, and I actually broke down in tears.
Was your impression of humanity changed as a result of these human connections that you had?
Well, yeah. I mean, from the whole trip, it was just an extraordinary experience with people. Everywhere I stopped, someone almost immediately was offering to help me, and it didn't matter where they were from, whether they had any money or no money. Some of the people I stayed with had huge amount of money. Some people had nothing. A couple of fishermen I stayed with, they had absolutely nothing. They were kind of really scraping around. And I'd say that the welcomes were almost identical. Incredible, really.
What do you think that connection was? What do you think that inspiration of them helping you was all about?
I don't know, actually, but I did think about whether if I had turned up without my boat, without being in a wetsuit, whether I'd just gone along and said, can I stay at your house if I was just walking, whether that would have received the same response. I suspect it probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah.
I don't think people were suspicious. I think by the fact I just landed on the beach in a boat, it's a bit of an unusual thing to do, to rock up in the middle of nowhere in a laser sailing dinghy. And most people had said, God, I wouldn't have gone there in your boat, and that was sort of the response. And a few of them took a while for them to connect exactly what I've been doing. And once they did, they become absolutely avid fans. So they were following me around the country, phoning me up, how you getting on? I started collecting quite a few groupies who were phoning me all the time. So that became quite a management effort, really. So I don't know quite why people would have helped me so much, but I don't think it's specific to me. I think it was just an unusual thing. And everyone wanted to be part of the journey, really.
Has it changed you in terms of your compassion towards others now?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I definitely would have a second take. In fact, it was a bit odd because before I came away, the day before I left, there was a guy in a van broken down in the middle of a roundabout on the road, and I drove. There was a huge traffic jam. Everyone was trying to go round him. No one stopped to help him. In the end, I drove up and helped him. Put my tow rope on the back of his van and just towed him off the roundabout. And I remember thinking, I wonder if that's, kind of God telling me that this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to end up broken down and people are going to come and help you. But I kind of found, so I don't know whether there's payback or not, but, it was quite a strange experience. The number of people that helped me. It wasn't just like one or two. It was pretty much everywhere I went. Do
you believe in karma?
I do, yeah. I'm beginning to, I definitely had a few God moments out there, and my mum is quite religious. I'm pretty lapsed in terms of the religious side, but she said to me, I was praying for you every day. So she thinks she's responsible for all the good stuff that's happened. So there you go. I let Mum take the credit for that.
Was there any moment when you thought you were going to die out there?
Yeah, Mulla Kintara, I thought it was a close one. So before I went, I asked all the people who'd done it before, I asked Jeremy and Ron, who I'd spoken to score. So I said to them, if 10 was dead and 1 was alive, what was the highest score you got to? And they both gave me a 9. Ron's was he had an enormous whale that surfaced right next to his boat. He thought he was going to get washed away, right? And I've forgotten which one. Jeremy's he got caught in a huge storm, I think, and they survived it. I guess On reflection, I thought I got to a 9.5 at the Mull of Kintyre.
What did that actually feel like? Can you describe what that feeling was like at that particular moment? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, it's just terrifying. I think for the first 20 minutes of the Mull of Kintyre, where it all started going pear-shaped, I pretty much froze and I just didn't really know what I was going to do to get out of it. And then in the end, I managed to get my head together and focused on just sailing to absolutely sailing to the best of my ability. And I managed to surf up and down these waves in and out, and I don't know how I got through some of those waves. I mean, they were just colossal, and they were all breaking. The problem is, it was like just a mental sort of foaming sea, and it went on for a long time. But looking back on it, I obviously couldn't get any film footage because I was too busy trying to stay in the boat, to be honest. But it was. Yeah, in fact, I started singing that song, Mull of Kintyre. Do you remember that song?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it was the longest running #1 in the UK. I remember hating it, absolutely hating it.
So
I was sort of singing my head off in this horrendous storm, trying to figure out how I was going to get through it.
It's a shame you didn't record it. We'd send it to Paul McCartney.
Yeah, could have.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing. So what do you wish you would have packed and taken with you now that you've done the trip, and you wish you'd had on board the boat, other than a GoPro camera set up on the mast to film you all the time?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else I would have I mean, I was getting rid of stuff all the way around. So all the way around, I was leaving kit behind because I was just trying to lighten the load. When I started off, I had tons of kit. I can't think of anything. The one thing I didn't take very early on was waterproof trousers. And I managed to, someone gave me a pair of waterproof trousers in Scotland. And they were the best asset I actually ever had, because in Scotland it rains so much this summer. It was the wettest summer since 1983. And it pretty much seemed to be cold, wet and miserable for the entire trip. And for the first week I was in Scotland, I had been really bad at making sure my shore trousers, I had one pair of trousers, one T-shirt, one jumper, one pair of shoes, one socks, and I hadn't kept them dry. So I was soaking wet in the evening as well as all day, and then getting into a wet tent. And after I got the waterproof trousers, I tell you, I went everywhere in them. Absolutely everywhere. I was like the most ridiculous looking person. Even when the sun was out, I had my waterproof trousers, because I thought there's no way I'm going to be wet ever again in the evening when I get ashore, because it was just the most miserable experience of my entire trip.
This is a travel show, and I think you've just put everyone off going to Scotland during the summertime.
Well, no, Scotland. I was a bit unlucky this summer. I was there in August, which apparently isn't really that summer.
Isn't this? It's gone by then, yeah. Let's talk about the end of the trip. And I watched the video of you coming onto the beach at your last landing, and Ron and Nick were there, and they were welcoming you coming up onto the beach. And I noticed that you arsed out of the boat pretty well onto the sand. Did you think about going back out and trying to reenact that one coming back in?
No, that was a very special one. I thought that was it. That boat hasn't moved since its landing. Actually, it's been put in their dinghy. I haven't been back to find it. No, but my head of safety, Pete, he scored me a 9.5 and a 10 for that landing.
For that landing, did he? Yeah. I noticed there was quite a bit of damage under the boat. Was that already previously there, or you'd done that a few times, I guess, during the trip?
Well, that was a bit of metal. That's my sacrificial bit of metal on the. I had a strip all the way along the boat, so when I pulled the boat up the beach, it wouldn't completely grind all the gel coat off. So I put an aluminium door strip. It was a very thin bit of aluminium, and I had 4 pieces glued on, and that is the third of the fourth one that got ripped off as I did land on that beach. But the first 2 got trashed earlier on. The last one is still on the boat, so 1 out of 4 survived. It just protected the hull a bit, because quite often it was just literally dragged, quite a long way up over rocks and
Noticed on that video that Eastbourne turned on a beautiful day for you to arrive home again.
We did, yeah. Come on. Do you know what? I had to sit out the weather for 3 days. That was the longest stop I'd had before I got to Eastbourne. So I sat at Hayling Island with Steve Cockrell, who runs Rooster Sailing. And at his house, it was rather ironic, really, because Steve would give me a whole load of warm gear to go around in and really help me with a sail and other stuff that he'd supplied. And it was weird. I stayed at Hayling Island. I was 50 miles away from home, or 49, or whatever the exact number is. I can't remember. But the weather forecast was terrible for about, there was a window on the Monday to get back to Eastbourne. 50 miles was quite a big trip because the tide was all wrong. So I had to run against the tide for most of the day. I had 3 hours in the morning between the hours of, I think, 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And so I got there and ready to go at 5 o'clock in the morning to make the big trip back to Eastbourne. And there was no wind, not breath.
I watched your victory speech at the sailing club after you landed, and you mentioned that it was a life-changing experience. Can you tell us how that was a life-changing experience?
I just think it makes you realise the basic elements of life are most important: eating, people, and sleeping. And those three things. If people remember that when they're charging around, busily trying to get stressed about things in their life, eating, people, and sleeping, they're the key things. And that's a common denominator for everyone. I think it's just that, for me, has really reaffirmed my belief in humanity after the amount of people that helped me throughout my journey, really.
How much of a better sailor are you now as a result of this trip, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I'll let you know, because I'm going to sail in Hayling Island in the Masters laser event in October. So I do the circuit for geriatrics, really, but anyone over 33. So I'd say I'm much more comfortable in the boats, but to be honest, it's a different kind of sailing. When you're going around Britain, you're not racing, so you do everything you can possibly do to mitigate actually putting any effort. So it may have made me a worse racer. I don't know. It's too early to say yet, but I'll let you know.
Speak to a lot of my guests that are doing amazing things like what you've accomplished here, and they say to me that after they've finished and they've gone home and the cameras are turned off and the podcasting guys have gone away, you have a bit of a low period where that adrenaline, that life that you'd become accustomed to, that only you understood, goes away. How has that been for you?
Yeah, I'd say that's been tricky. This last week wasn't too bad because it's quite busy. Because a lot of people wanted to talk to me and stuff. But I'm beginning to think I've got to do something different with my life anyway. So I was sort of expecting it. I've got quite a few plans for stuff to happen. So it hasn't been too bad so far. But it definitely seems a bit odd not getting back in the boat every day, going somewhere new.
Are you going to visit schools and inspire young kids to chase their dreams?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, I'm doing some talks. I haven't actually put the plan together. I'm just finishing compiling my notes at the moment. So I've got probably a couple of weeks before I got that finished. I did a little talk at my sailing club at the weekend, and I will probably do a bit of talking for, I don't quite know how long for, but do a bit of a sort of motivational speaking bit. And I was really impressed, actually. In Aberdeen, I came across a sailing trust called the Aberdeenshire Sailing Trust, and there's a lady up there called Angie. I think it's Angie. She was teaching kids the day I landed in 35 knots when I wouldn't go into the harbour because the waves were breaking over the top of it. She was teaching kids in the harbour. Admittedly, it's an inner harbour there, so it wasn't as windy. Who were running around in T-shirts and a pair of shorts and some old shoes. And I came in with all my sailing gear, shivering to death, thinking, my God, there was loads of them. And all these kids were doing it. They paid her £5 a day, I think it was, to go sailing with her.
Yep.
She got a really big team, loads of kids. these kids were their parents were defined as being in poverty, so they couldn't afford, very much. And I thought it was the most inspirational thing I've ever seen, really.
Fantastic. Well, I'm
So
sure there's...
we're probably going and try to see if we can help people who are doing similar things to that, in the long term.
Yeah, terrific.
Because, certainly, you can get kids doing stuff, then they tend to cause less trouble, and they build a future for themselves normally.
Was it the smallest? Is it the Laser the smallest boat that's been sailed around the UK? Do you know?
I believe it is. Yeah, I'm not aware of anyone else who's done it in anything other than the Laser. I mean, they've done. There is a girl who's done it on a paddleboard, but not all the way around. She did Land's End to John O'Groats, so she did kind of one length of the UK. I'm not aware of anyone else. I suppose I think some people have canoed round, they kayaked round.
Yeah.
But I'm not actually sure who they are. I haven't met them. But we formed a little Round Britain club, actually.
Oh, cool.
So there's, I think there's about 6 people in the club who I know who've done it in dinghies. Yeah, so I've just been invited to join that little club. So that's quite nice.
Fantastic. Are you going to stay away from bars now and having bets with your mates on doing challenges?
Yeah, I think so, probably. Although I have got a bit of a cunning plan coming up, so I'm not going to tell you about it yet because it's a bit too early. But I have got a bit of a scheme which I've been thinking about for quite a long time. A new plan.
I hope you're going to drag Jeff into this one because it sounds like he's got to get off his butt and do something.
Yeah, poor old Jeff. He spent all the time I was sailing around Britain. He'd been renovating his house that he bought in Inverness. So he just finished the day I landed. So I need to get him on his bike, get him out there.
One last question before I let you go. What's this trip meant to you in terms of your life journey?
Oh, it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life. Definitely recommend it to anyone just to get out there and find out where you live, really, because now I have actually sailed every inch of the island I live on, and I feel I understand much more about where I live than I did previously, and the people who live on it. And so for me, it's made me realise why Great Britain is called great. It's just been a brilliant experience.
That's a great note to end on. So, Neil Peters, I'd like to thank you very much for being on the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm going to put the link into your Facebook page, so if anybody wants to contribute to your prostate cancer fund that you're doing, they can do so by connecting with that, and we'll let them know how to get in touch with you. So, thank you very much for being on the show, and we look forward to chatting again when you take on your next adventure, Neil.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, all the best.
Good luck with your project.
Wow. Wasn't that cool? Around Great Britain in a dinghy, sailing dinghy. And my hat's off to Neil, a.k.a. Stick Daring, for that courageous and extraordinary adventure. Just done the summertime around Great Britain. It took him 76 days, if you're wondering how long it took him to do that trip. Absolutely incredible. And he arrived safely back in Eastbourne to the wishes of many who followed the journey. So there you go. If you're looking for other amazing adventure stories, go to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. You will find all of our podcast episodes right there. If you want to download our podcast episodes, you can find them on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and a host of other locations, which are all listed on our website. So there we go. That brings us to the end of this particular episode. If you do enjoy our content, please share it with family and friends and tell everybody about the Global Travel Channel. We're also trying to get our name out to as many people as we possibly can. So we thank you in advance for doing that. All that's left for me to say today is my name is Mark Philpott. Until we meet again, I wish you all bon voyage.